Ready?
All right, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order, and we'll start with the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would entertain the motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I just had a question. There wasn't anything included with the early graduation requests. Do we know how many, or alternative school or high school, or what those are?
They should have been on
They
there.
were confidential.
They just should have a
Oh,
little
maybe
lock
it's not.
symbol there so that only you guys can see it.
So if you go into it,
Are you guys, can you see them on
You
yours?
have to actually
No.
log on though.
So I'm probably not logged on to
Didn't
this one.
show.
I'm
I'm logged
Can you
on.
just tell me how many there were? Just 3? Are they from the high school, alternative school, or some of each?
I believe they're all high school. We have the hard copies here. You have them still?
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Or where mine doesn't.
We have to
Are you
log
logged
in.
in?
I'm logged
I'm
in.
logged in.
Mine didn't.
Maybe I put them as locked instead of confidential, so.
I don't even
That's
see the
probably my
little,
mistake.
the little paperclip next to the graduation request.
You
Yeah.
wouldn't, Derek, if I made them confidential.
Oh, okay.
You don't have that kind of.
I guess I don't have that kind of clout.
Me neither.
You should.
But where would you get into it?
You just click into it and then you would be able to see them.
But it doesn't show it, does it?
No.
Yeah.
If you scroll down to where the enclosures are, is there anything attached as you go down further in the? Oh,
No.
okay.
Just the calendar, yeah, no.
The last time I looked, there was just the calendar.
Yeah. And then a whole bunch got added to me. Yeah, they're right here.
Oh, these are all of them?
Mhm.
Or-
There's just
There's just
Yeah.
3 of them.
Oh, there's just 3.
That's all the supporting documentation.
Gotcha.
Gotcha.
That was the only question I had. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the consent agenda? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Move into discussion items. There's been some talk about the shuttle service for employees in schools. Kristen, you gave us a recommendation. You want to give us the Reader's Digest version of it, or you can whatever portion?
Sure. So in previous years, we were running a shuttle that was specifically for the children of our employees. So many of our employees teach in a building different than where their students were going to school. And on occasion, for some of them, it's difficult to either drop their children off in the morning or pick them up in the afternoon based on what their contract time is for their own specific building that they work in. That shuttle was something that we looked at when we were having to cut costs last year, and we had decided to go ahead and eliminate it. That was when the levy filled the second time in May. The cost of the shuttle was right around $15,000. There have been some requests from employees to add that shuttle back. So we tried to look at, the full picture. We surveyed staff to understand who was using it, how many, if we thought we could justify the cost or pass some of that cost off to the employees to subsidize it and make it doable. But what we found is we only had 26 kids using the shuttle. Some of those kids belong to the same family. And so passing on that cost, we just felt, probably no one was going to be interested in something that high. So our recommendation has been to not return that shuttle. just feeling like we really can't justify that cost to the community for the district to be supporting it and paying for it.
This item has not come before the negotiation team as an official negotiated item. We have been told, or I've heard that they've been asked to bring it, and the teachers union as a whole has decided not to get to bring it because it only represents a few number of staff. I think it was a great service that we provided, but I also feel that if you have a job, it's not your employer's responsibility to get your kids to and from where they need to be. And there's so many parents who drive those routes every day. Like I go from Mill Creek to the middle school to Mill Creek. I could throw extra kids in my car. Like I think if the teachers would just reach out and say, hey, I'm in a pickle, I need some help, that there's a lot of parents that would be willing to help them run their kids back and forth and help them accommodate them. But I agree that it shouldn't be something that taxpayers should be supporting when we're not supporting busing to athletics. We're not, and that's a lot more kids than 26. So
Do we have an idea of how many of these, the people that use it are out of district?
I do now. I don't have a handle on that. Probably a fair amount, I would guess, because we have a lot of our staff that drives in from neighboring districts.
I just think the cost per student and everything we're cutting doesn't make sense, so, at this time anyway, so.
I mean, it's certainly $15,000 is a big chunk for a chauffeur when there's a lot of other things that need that help, that support. Maybe there's a way to have the community raise that money or something like that, because we certainly don't want the teachers to feel like we're not supporting them. But if we're here to manage this money and that's a significant chunk towards a aid for something or something else, it's just really hard to justify that as somebody driving a shuttle for kids.
And was that all it was specifically used for? Just so they couldn't like jump on, if there was a bus that was coming to the middle school, they couldn't just jump on and ride to the middle school and they'd let them off?
So we had a conversation with Caldwell Transportation, because we do have some instances where those buses are running those routes anyway.
Mm-hmm.
They were not willing to just run the kiddos for free. We asked if we could, kind of work out a deal there, since they are already running that route, and we were not successful. And
That's too bad. It seems like that's what they used to do.
I mean, there were some instances where that was the case.
Mhm.
Certainly, I'm sure they had routes that they weren't normally running between schools that were that added cost.
Okay.
Like you said, Alicia, we have such a low ridership as it is because we have so many parents picking up. If there's a way to extend that to those teachers that,
Yeah,
there's definitely, the community's
idea.
definitely driving between schools.
I do. I go from the middle school to the high school, so I got a van. Jump in.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe we can, maybe that's a solution. Anybody else have any other questions or comments? Moving on to discussion item. The next one's our continuous improvement plan. And I put it on there because one, it's required by state statute, 33-320. We signed off on it. I know they put together this for October. I know Lisa's involved with it. And through state statute, it says the board and the community should be involved in it. So we shouldn't just approve it. This is probably where we start to live as a board, to look at these numbers. We don't want to get into it tonight, but we'll pass it out and you guys can take a look at it. But it's target goals. And it's really where that's the governance from the school board, like what's our target? And then that team needs to figure out how to get us there. It's kind of a snapshot of, where were we, where are we, and where do we want to go? You're looking at band data, which would be, every year, what's third grade reading look like, or cohort data where it's following a group of kids through second, third, and fourth. And I mean, since I've been here, typically we get 1 or 2 reports from Lisa kind of giving us that information. And I really think the board is where we need to learn to live and understand how much work goes into that. And then it would lead us into a budget discussion of, do we want to tweak curriculum, or do we want to have more, EAs? Or I think that's a good discussion of what they're trying to accomplish and how we accomplish it. So I think as we go forward, we should probably talk about this every 2 months, bring it up, take one little section of it, discuss it, so that we become familiar with it, but we also have the community involvement where they understand what we're doing, what's our educational system doing, what do these numbers mean, and how does Middleton stack up across the state? Because when you look at how we stack up, we do well. And I think we need to share that, and then we continue to sharpen that pencil and do even better. But I think there's so much work that goes on behind the scenes that we need to understand those numbers and start to understand what the goals are and be involved with those goals and involve the community, understand how well we're doing, and then where we need help. If it's in class size, or if it's in full-time, kindergarten, or CTE, or trying to drive some of these goals of reading or math. And I just think as a board, as a state statute, where we go, start looking at these numbers, I think we'll put it on the agenda every couple months, so we take a look at it, refresh ourselves, and then make sure our community is aware of it too, and share that data, and we understand that data, so we can measure ourselves against everybody else, in the state. It's kind of how education is going. The legislature are going to revisit this year. They're trying to make this data more and more available so people can go on and compare, budgets and success from school district to school district. So I think the more we're in front of that, the better we'll be, and understanding all the work that goes behind the scenes in this process. So I didn't say anything to you, Lisa, before. I don't know if you had anything to add or.
No, I think just whatever questions you guys have, we currently submit it. There's 3 parts to it, and you have a choice to submit 3 parts separately, or you can submit it as a comprehensive plan. We currently submit it as the comprehensive plan, so all 3 portions are built into this one document. And so you'll see all 3 portions built into that. And so just so you understand where we're at with that, but that's currently how we've been submitting it for the last few years. So it's all there together.
Do we use pieces of our accreditation that we weren't doing so well in, or we're developing still, to help drive that still? Is that data still pertinent, or are we past that and into a new realm of starting over? Or
No, I think it's very pertinent. When we look at the goals we've been continually setting around academic achievement, it sits around that 5%, and that aligns back to accreditation. What this plan doesn't necessarily look at when it comes to accreditation is some of those systematic changes we wanted to make based off the recommendations. It just doesn't necessarily fit how it's written. But the academic pieces, the literacy pieces, the college and career planning, with those metrics, we have the ability to write some goals in there that we can align back in as well. And so the way they have the template set up, there's certain requirements, but then there's also flexibility in that where we can add other goals as well if we'd like to. So it just depends on how, as a group, you'd want to start focusing those in that template.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I'll take us into action items and move into policy section 3000.
So yeah, you have the first reading of policy section 3000 in front of you, which is the student section. The policy committee has been working on this since late summer, and we just finished our latest revisions last week. So it feels good to be through this next chunk of policy and have it ready for you guys. It'll be back on the agenda in January for you to review a second time. And the recommendation, I had just pointed out one policy that you guys might want to have further conversation on. I think it's 3035. And it is the policy that deals with open and closed campus. That is a change in policy from what we've previously had and a change in practice. So our previous policy had all campuses in Middleton closed. The high school's been operating, I guess, a little bit between a closed and an open campus. They've been trying to run that off of permission slips, which has got to be a little bit tricky to run that every lunch period about, if kids have permission to be leaving campus or not, and monitoring that and seeing who is leaving those gates at lunchtime. We felt like it was a better approach to put a policy into practice that defined how we were running open and closed campus at the high school. So in that new policy, we have the elementary campuses and the middle school campus closed, high school campus open for lunch, and then any other release time activities that we would normally allow.
I think that recommendation makes sense, and I think just for as many kids who have work release and are leaving because they only have they're seniors and they only have a couple of class periods and all the seminary release time students, I think it's just more consistent. And knowing where we are staff wise, I can't imagine they have any extra staff members sitting around checking whether or not a kid has.
Has it always been that way? Because it seems like it went into effect maybe in 2016, 2015. Because I had a child, and then one day all of a sudden they could leave and do whatever. They wouldn't even let them go to their car.
Yeah, I don't know if that changed with leadership change at
Must
the high
have.
school.
Must have.
I'm not sure.
Well, you've got a lot of growth. All of that area around the high school is just being built out with tons of homes. I think that it makes a lot of sense to ease the burden on, if kids are just running across the street, down the block, whatever, to go to the home shopping network for lunch, then that makes a lot of sense. So
Yeah, I would agree.
that'll soften some of the burden of the cafeteria.
If we declare it as an open campus per policy, does that change our liability status at all or release us of any liability because that's how it's written in policy?
So from my standpoint, it's an improvement to our liability because what we had going on before was in writing and policy, we're a closed campus, but I can't imagine with the number of students up there compared to the number of administrators that they were able to 100% account for all of those kids every day without any slipping through the cracks and leaving campus when they shouldn't have been. So now we have it in policy, but it's open campus. We're not responsible for what happens during that lunch hour or other release time. And that's really a better place for us to be unless we're gonna lock that campus down hard.
And then whose responsibility would it be to make sure that this gets reflected into the handbook? Just the high school principal to make sure their handbooks is consistent with what the policy says?
We will have a lot of handbook work to do this coming year simply because of how much policy we've changed. But yes, that's the principals that work on handbooks.
Is this enacted then for the school year starting 2021, August, September? Or is it immediate?
So this wouldn't actually be effective until you get through all the readings and fully adopt it. The recommendation in January will be that you waive the second reading and just adopt at that point. So it could be into effect at that point. Like I said, right now they don't have a hard lockdown on that campus, so it would just kind of continue to be as it is until then.
And it states it's a privilege, and it also states the district is not responsible for the health, safety, welfare of students when they're off campus. So,
Do you need a motion?
we need a motion to accept the first reading.
Do we need to specifically identify that, or the changes have already been made, so we just accept the reading as written?
Yeah, first reading.
Okay, so I make a motion that we accept the first reading for policy section 3000. The 3000 section.
I second it.
Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0.
And if I can just add to that real quickly, a big thank you to everybody that sat on that committee. It's been a lot of hours of work. We have district administrators on it, principals, teachers, leadership from the MEA. There's about 10 of us that come together for several hours and just read and revise policy. So thank you to everybody with helping.
Were they the same ones that did the 6,000 or 5,000 ones we already
Yeah,
did?
we've kept that group consistent and they've hung tight with us, which we appreciate.
It's a lot of policy. Thank you.
Yes.
The next item is the 2021 school calendar graduation date. So if you read that what happened is that with COVID and extension, the IHSAA extended the spring sports. So we're gonna slide that a week. We usually host a 3A track meet at the high school. So that's why we're asking to push it a week. We'll most likely have athletes involved in another state tournament, the state tournaments and other sports. So because of COVID, that's the push. I don't know if there's any more to add to that or if that's basically.
No, that's really it. And we just wanted to get the change out as quickly as possible. We know people are making plans for graduation and if we were going to make the change, we just wanted to go ahead and get it approved so that we could notify everyone.
So I've had some feedback from a couple of parents. Number one was that it kind of made the whole experience of graduation a little less special by extending that week and having seniors still in school. And then the other was that one was a healthcare worker and had to put in a year ahead of time to get that day off, and now it's just been approved, and so to manipulate that or move that is going to be prohibitive for them. And I think that's really tough for somebody who has been waiting that long to deal with. So I would, I don't know how I feel about it at this point, looking at some of the reasons. I mean, we're moving it because of sports. And sports has gotten a lot of concessions, and I think that the community feels like there's been more of a focus on sports, and now we're adjusting this because of sports. Is a little apprehensive about it. Certainly, I would say that if we were to go this route, then I would lean towards trying to make that end of the year for seniors somewhat special. Set them aside. Maybe not have the whole week, but just adjust the graduation date. Specifically, instead of adding, it looks like we're adding an extra week of final, like an extra week, and then they're doing that finals that they weren't doing. They would have done that a week before. Maybe doing some revisions on that.
I think.
Or am I not reading this right?
I'm gonna have to call on my lifeline because I can't remember where we landed on this,
So when we calculated the hours, seniors will still finish the 20th. Their last day of school will still be the 20th. So
Okay.
that is not gonna change at all. So they'll final out that week. The change would be that instead of graduation being on that date, it would be on the 26th. Some of the plans that the high school has shared with us during these conversations during that week of the 26th is the night of the 25th, they would still do their awards assembly. And then seniors would be invited to that, obviously, and it would still be a family event and whatever that looks like in May. So they're still planning for that evening to be a special celebration. And then the 26th, they still plan for their senior breakfast. They're doing the senior parade and doing that preparation and then doing the parade and then kind of going through the same process with pictures, the stage with the diploma, the reception, and then they would still have their Wahoo's event that evening. And so it's just changing. They're not going to eliminate any of what they would have done. It's just making sure we have that facility available to us on the 26th, and state track would be on the 20th. It makes a conflict with the facility, and then making sure we have that facility available to us so we can still continue those same celebrations that we did last year.
In the event of COVID injections and everything else working out, is there a plan B? Or this is just how we're gonna run the graduation at this point? I mean, are we considering any other?
So we actually talked about that earlier today. I think they're trying to lay the groundwork for graduation plans, knowing that we have no idea what's going to happen between now and May. So we're trying not to lock anything down, without being sure. The other thing I would just add to that is The other concern, and I get it's still sports, but any of those students that are participating in the state track for 4A, they may be out of town during graduation.
Yeah,
So
yes.
certainly didn't want
They
to see
would
them
be.
miss out either as student graduates.
What are the other districts doing? Are they all on board?
They're all on board.
And we're doing it at
So, I mean,
high
we're the last of the
school
Mohicans,
instead
so
of
to
at the
speak.
Idaho Center.
The other
I mean,
SIC districts have all moved graduation to
Okay.
1 week later.
Okay, it makes sense to
Yeah.
do
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Plus too, there's, I mean, when you look at the 3A, yes, it's sports, but it's still providing that we can still hold the event and everything else. That's still income to Middleton. That's income
Oh,
to
it's great
our
income,
school
yes.
and everything else, and we can't bypass that. We're not affecting the seniors as far as
No, 'cause
schooling
they
is
get out of
concerned.
school, yeah, they get out.
And what
yeah.
have you, and it is unfortunate that there may be a couple individuals that it affects, unfortunately. But in the bigger picture, it seems like it makes more sense to move it that extra week if
It's okay,
that's
last
what
year I
all the
did
other
have a
districts
time
have
to
already
graduation
done.
week.
The high school also felt like, the high school administration also felt like there was a positive piece to it, and that there might be 3 or 4 or 5 seniors that are just on that cusp that could use that last week to hit that graduation passing
Gotcha.
point and be able to walk the line where they would have missed out before just with those extra days.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I make a motion that we go ahead and approve extending the graduation date to May 26, 2021.
There's a second.
I'll second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-1. Action item 6C, evaluate category level change, amend reopening plans as needed. I think we've looked at this in the first half of the year, and we started the year with our creating a green, yellow, red, soft red, and we opened up in yellow. We followed through with that. We were cautious, and we saw the effects of that. We've gone red. We've been a school district out here west that chose to go full time. We've seen spread at the county level, and I think there's debate at the school level if there's spread within the school. Statewide, we really haven't seen it in the schools, but I know everybody's worried about it. I know Kristen has a recommendation. I know the CDC's updated their quarantine guidelines to get people to try to follow them. So I know we will have a robust discussion over that. So Kristen, did you want to highlight anything, or how'd you want to?
Are you guys talking about the quarantine piece?
Yeah, kind of quarantine, State of the Union, you know, it's your.
Well, just in review of the last few weeks, so this is our 3rd week back since the Thanksgiving break, and I've tried to keep you guys mostly apprised of what we're experiencing with staff and student absenteeism. Last week was by far our hardest week. I was concerned about what we were going to see coming into this week, but we've actually seen an improvement in staff absences, so that has been nice. I know you guys are aware of the challenges last week because many of you came in to help us, so that we were not in a position to be shutting down. As far as quarantine goes, and the recommendation, basically what I've laid out is my concerns with changing to that new alternative that the CDC has put forth and Southwest District Health, I know, has just recently approved that. My concern is that I think we would ultimately just mostly be shortening that quarantine time for students. The staff, we have really tried to deal with case by case and determine if they had substantial exposure to COVID before we dish out those quarantine timelines. A lot of our staff, in conjunction with their building administrator, have used that essential worker clause and stayed here and stayed masked and stayed distanced when their job allows them to do so, knowing that some positions, that distancing it can't be achieved when you're a one-on-one behavioral aid in a special ed classroom. We just can't have that.
I was one of those.
Yes, I heard. And so as we look at this, I feel like that's mostly where we would be shortening up those quarantines is on the student end. And I am concerned, I mean, we've seen it from staff, we've seen it from students, that it's the very end of that quarantine before they start to show symptoms. And obviously that's not always the case, but we have seen it happen. And I am just concerned that if we shorten those quarantines, we're only going to see our staff get sick more frequently. And if the goal is to stay open, I'm just not so sure that that's the best way to go.
Well, what are your thoughts on a test being the ultimate overarching decision-making process? I mean, if somebody's out for 7 to 10 days and even, people, I know we've got a lot of parents like, what's going on? Why is my kid out? What are your thoughts and what do you think that the general feel from the other campuses would be on if they test negative, cool, let them go?
So that new guidance allows them to test between days 5. They can't test any earlier than day 5 and no later than day 7. And then of course they have to wait for the results to come back. And they have to be without any symptoms. And then when they come back, the guidance says that they have to not only have a face covering on until they hit that 14-day mark, but also be physically distanced. And in the level of operation that we're at, that it's just not possible for us to follow that guidance.
I just think we should be able to test out of it. I guess that's
I struggle because I feel like it's to the point where there's kids who are going to start getting quarantined back to back to back. And I guess if I had more confidence in the online consistency between the schools, that I'd be more confident in supporting that. But there's not consistency. This week has been extremely frustrating. And I know of kids who had a headache and a tummy ache and they're out for 10 days and they had a negative COVID test. And that's frustrating because it was a healthcare provider who now has to take 2 weeks off work because their kid had a tummy ache and a negative test. And those are the people we're shorting. Like, they need to be in the hospital working. I know of another healthcare worker who's a nurse brought their child to school because schools were shut down. And I understand the risk, but I also understand that there's got to be a happy medium. And I feel like adopting these guidelines just gives an option. And I understand that the social distancing part is going to be hard, but I also think that we can try it and figure it out. I mean, if you've only got, I guess it just depends on interpretation and how they want to read it. But I feel like there has to be another way besides 14 days and that's it. That's an end all. Like, there's too many false tests. There's too many false positives. There's too many unknowns. There's people that live in the same house. One person ends up in the hospital on a ventilator and the other person never gets sick. Like, you just don't know. So it's hard to make blanket rules for everyone that are so strict without having any flexibility for it to just be successful. And the rates are trending down. Like, I think we had 900. I mean, they're not in the 2000s anymore and they're still high. Like, everyone can agree that they're still high. I asked about the admissions to West Valley the other day. They had like 24 2 weeks ago, then they had 15. I think of this week they have 11, seven of which are in the ICU, 4 of which are not. And I I don't know, I have a hard time because so much of the information is inconsistent. I feel like if this is coming from the CDC, then it's appropriate for us to follow the CDC guidelines the best we can. If we can't social distance them, then maybe that's something that we won't be able to do, but at least it gives people an option. If there's one kid that's out and they test negative and you can social distance that one kid, then why not give them a shot? Like, if it's half the class that's out because they're positive, I mean, that might be a different story, but I just feel like we need to find some type of middle ground. And I feel like a hard 14 days for everyone regardless is a little over the top.
I agree.
I agree. And that's the emails that the emails, and we've all seen a lot of the emails and stuff like that, that parents are very frustrated with that, and their kid, there is no actionable item there. There's nothing to go off of. It's just straight 14 days, and they're very frustrated because they don't understand it. My kid's not sick or anything else, but yet they're losing the education. They're losing the consistency, the online, like we were talking, like you said, and everything else. I think this actually, the new CDC guidelines actually simplifies it a little bit more rather than just a straight 14 days with the 7-day testing. If you're gonna pop for a test and you test negative, you're back in school. And the 10-day without testing. Obviously, none of us are experts. And in fact, I don't think CDC or Southwest District Health are all experts either. They're just trying to do the best they can as well. They're more of experts than we are, but at the same time, I like these guidelines much better than hard 14 days.
In Southwest District Health, they're not doing contact tracing anymore, or are they? For our school stuff.
They are to their ability. They're a very overwhelmed system right now, so we certainly don't see the level of involvement that we saw from them in the beginning when cases were much lower. So we've mostly been left to our own devices with contact tracing.
And so how are we doing that? Is that who's sitting by who? Is it what class? It's what's our
That
view?
has all been passed on to building administration.
Okay,
So they're looking at the situation. They're looking at who was within that 6-foot distance and for how long. The CDC also came out with new guidance that said no longer for just up to 15 minutes, but a total of 15 minutes over a 24-hour period. That's
Which
pretty
is
tricky to trace. So
almost 2
we
minutes,
mostly just
3
stuck with
minutes.
the 15 minutes because
No,
that's impossible
you don't have
to
time.
try and trace that. So,
And how many positive COVID tests have we had in staff and kids?
I need time to pull that together.
But
I can
we're,
get it for you, but
the whole year, we're at less than 20?
no, probably,
Confirmed?
this is a guess.
No, I just,
it's okay.
no, just confirm.
Probably 100.
That are
Between all
positive.
schools.
District-wide staff and students. We have a lot of students out on quarantine due to positive family members within the household.
But students
they're not-
themselves coming back.
Yeah, but
Sorry, say that.
Students themselves are not necessarily, there's guilt by association.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
yeah, so
Yes.
so that 100 includes,
No,
No.
that
No.
100 would just be the student or the staff member
Actual
has
positive.
a confirmed positive test.
Yeah.
okay.
But I guess that's where I struggle is because if I test positive and all my kids have to stay out of school and then a sibling tests positive, but they still never do the whole time. They could be out for 3 months because if it just goes like one by one, or then the person sitting next to them got it, they were back for one day and then they get it. And then they're out for another 2 weeks. I still question the antibody test. Like if you have antibodies, shouldn't you be able to come to school? If you get a positive test, you're good for 3 months. So I guess there just has to be another option. I just feel like there needs to be some leeway. And the other thing that does not make sense to me is if everyone's wearing masks like they should be, which I know that there's some issues there as well, but the chances of you getting it are slim. I'm not saying it's impossible, But logically, doesn't it make sense that if everyone's in mask, that your risk is down and then you
Yes.
still wait your 7 days?
I have girls that have worked through COVID the whole time and not gotten COVID because they always have a mask on.
So I
And they work
just,
fast food. So they
yeah,
see
I mean,
all
there's
kinds of
people,
germs.
there's grocery store workers. I mean, people are around people all day, every day. But I just think it's putting a bigger toll on our teachers because they're trying to catch up with kids who are basically on a 2-week vacation. And then it takes a bigger toll on the families because they're trying to figure out daycare or something to do with their kids. They usually get sent to grandma and grandpa's, who usually end up with COVID and get sick.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't, there just has to be another way. And I feel like if this is coming down from the CDC, that we could make it work for us. And at least it provides an option. It's something.
So I certainly feel like there's gotta be a way for, the kid that's sitting 2 desks away to test out of it at least. I mean, I haven't done the research as of recent as to what the CDC feels like the incubation periods are and things like that. But I mean, and I know that you could be asymptomatic. So I mean, we could have tons of kids just running around not even knowing that they've got it, which is why we've got masks on. But to just kind of one fell swoop, blow everything out. I mean, I'm really, if you test positive, I want to make sure that it's gone. That's super important. But if you're next to somebody that tests positive, there's got to be a way to be able to, okay, you're under quarantine, it's 14 days, but if you want to run to the doctor after 7 days or down to Walgreens or wherever and get a test, then you can come back sooner. Seems to me that that's relatively safe. I don't think I'm in favor of just saying, you know what, just stay home for a couple of days, get a headache, stay there. I think we have to have something intelligent telling us that, okay, no, this person really is safe, even though they were in the general area. That I would support, but just keeping everybody gone for 14 days, I just don't know that it's 100% necessary.
Well, to Alicia's point, the CDC did revise their standard. They still said you could get symptoms between day 10 and 14. They just felt it was so much of a burden that they weren't getting anybody to participate. They're like, okay, they were blowing it completely off. And so that was kind of the reason to try to move this back to 7 and 10. There's still risk between 10 and 14, but it's less and the positive test. And so that's kind of when we said it meetings ago, we knew this was under discussion, that the CDC was looking at it. But I also think it does lead into the staffing discussion that we had, that we need help from the community. If we're going to be a community school, we're going to be open. We don't just need substitute teachers. We could use people for 2 hours of playground duty, or we could do aides that are one-on-one with these kids. So there's different levels of help we could need, or that we will need.
You probably still have to go get fingerprinted for all that, just because.
Not to volunteer for lunch duty and stuff, you don't, or recess, as long as you're not in a room alone with kids.
And make sure you dress warm. It'll be cold for the whole day.
So I think that's an important piece. If we're going to try to continue to stay open, January and February are going to be interesting months. I would assume March, the teachers are going to start getting vaccinations at that point in time if they want them. But we have to be prepared for January and February. And that's going to be this community coming together and helping us out too, and not having staffing so thin. Because basically what we've said is that, we've abandoned green, red, yellow, and we basically adopted a model that says we're going to stay open. If there's kids in school to be taught and teachers to teach, they're going to be open. It's more of a whooping cough scenario where you've lost 40% of your kids or 15% of your teachers. We moved much more into that model versus this green, yellow, and red. And that's caused stress to people because they're wondering what we're doing. We had that plan.
And we're not following it.
We're not following it. And we followed at the beginning, and then we backed into this. We watched the risk to kids not being in school versus in school. And we watched the numbers of, who's being sick and who's getting healthy and how serious it is to kids under 18. And it's always left our teachers in the gray area. There's no question about that.
I do think also in this recommendation, I don't know if Kristen didn't get a chance to talk about it, but, do you want to talk about, Kristen, the positivity rate of 5% in the 2 weeks?
Sure, so the second part of the recommendation was just that as we return from Christmas break, if we start to see absenteeism rates that were similar to last week, that we called stop. We can't run those programs without staffing. It's a liability for all of us when we're not appropriately staffed. And then also that 5% of positivity between students and staff over that 14-day period, that's from the Department of Health and Welfare. And a recommendation that they have put forth that schools consider long-term closures. If you reach that, that's 5% doesn't seem like a lot, but that's really pretty high. If you do the math on 4,000, it's about 225.
Yeah.
So
Could we do it on a school to school,
I was gonna say, was it
Like-
like the recommendation per school?
or is it like
I
the
don't
whole
think it's-
district,
I don't think
district-wide?
it's per school. I don't know that it was stated to that level. We can look at it per school, but anytime that we find we have available staff from one school to help another school, we move that staff. So at some point it becomes a district issue.
Oh, yeah,
So this 5%, if we did it per district or for a district overview, it would be only if they had a positive COVID test. So not the amount of that are quarantined. And then what would be the 2-week period? Is it a Monday to a Monday? Is it 14 school days? Is it a rolling average? Is it?
It's 14 calendar days based on a rolling average. So for every 14 days, first day would drop off. The 15th day would add on, would look at that 14-day period and what our percentage is between students and staff combined. And at the time that we decided to close, it would be for at least 14 calendar days.
I guess I have a hard time with the rolling average piece because by the time you get a positive test, you could have gotten that 3 days ago or 5 days ago by the time you get results. So I have a hard time with the rolling average because I feel like it's so far gone by the time you close schools. That's too late. Like,
Yeah, I mean, if we're in a position to where we just can't staff it, we can't staff it. We don't have
just
a
shut down.
choice.
Let's
Right.
look at staffing as one side, but the other side is transition. And if we have that many people positive in the schools, we probably shouldn't be in school at full capacity.
right. I guess my question, I would be in support of putting, and the other reason that this has come up also is because the MEA, the teachers have been asking, I don't know when you guys read through those surveys and stuff, that they want to know, they need a number. They want to know like, well, when are we going to shut down? What does that number look like? What does that look like? And I feel like we need to try and figure something out to give them other than until we run out of staff, because that could mean a whole myriad of things. But the 14-day period, I think I would like to discuss to see what that looks like and how it starts and stops. And I guess the transition period too, like how much time, like if we go Monday to Monday, I mean, and whose numbers we use to track that. Cause I know the health department looks at numbers differently than
We would be using our own numbers.
the state. So we just use our numbers that are reported, but how often do they get reported to us?
I can get a report on them anytime. I just can call Southwest District Health, but internally, we know when we have a positive case. We don't,
Just if
right
they
now, we don't
reported.
keep a running total, but that's an easy problem with this.
Well, I think we need to come up with a number, and I think we do have to have a plan to go online, and I think we should have, when we come back in January, we should have basically like a fire drill to know what it would look like if we said we're flipping the switch. We've obviously struggled with the online piece just because it's online, but
What's critical mass for staffing? Like where is that? We absolutely won't be able to, my bigger concern is staffing. So, I mean, we'll deal with that, but I mean, where are we at? I don't know if we look at that per building or just overall, that is like we can't open the school because we don't have enough people, enough warm bodies in classroom.
That's a really difficult question to answer because it depends on who you have missing. Right now,
that's
we
true.
still have, I think, 7.5 open positions in the district that are just vacant and unfilled.
Well, then, I mean,
But
then
that
we start at
looks-
a deficit, right?
As people start to, get sick and call out, part of it is dependent on how many subs you have that are willing to come in, and that changes day to day. Part of it depends on what positions those people fulfill, how important is that position? Is it just is it a Title I aide that is more of a support? And we can figure out how to restructure without them, or is it a classroom teacher that we've got to find someone to move in there? Like, to just give you a hard number is really difficult because it really just depends on who we're missing and in what programs.
Yeah. And usually you'll take aides and put them in the teaching spot, correct? Which disrupts duties and all kinds of stuff. So,
Well, the problem is, we need to have something, and we can't hit a moving target. And I understand that some of these may be, they just didn't feel good today, and it's not a COVID issue. And so, we've got 5 teachers out of, X number of teachers overall district wide, and then tomorrow 10 of them are back. But if we've got some consistency of a couple of days of 40 people being gone, whatever that number is, and we can't fill those spots regardless of whether it's the sniffles or it's COVID, then we call the game, right? I mean, that's to me is probably more important than how many kids are out sick, because
stand number.
realistically, when we
Staff?
look at the demographics on
I think that's what
the Southwest District's
5%
site,
That's just for staff.
the 5 to 18-year-old kids are just not as impacted. And whether that's, they're just asymptomatic, so a lot of them aren't getting tested or whatever, it seems to be holding pretty well. So, I mean, I'm not anticipating, unless somebody's having some massive, party over the weekend, over winter break, that we're gonna have some super spreader event that's gonna wipe out the school. But it could happen. But it'd just be nice to be able to see what that number is, and base that off of. When we hit this number, we cannot function, period.
I would say that number is somewhere close to 40. I mean, 40 is what we hit on Tuesday of last week. I think that's the day I had
It was
you
Wednesday.
guys come in. So maybe it was Wednesday we hit 40.
Yeah.
But again, could we hit 40 differently and be okay? We could. Could we hit 30 and not be okay? Yes.
It just depends.
But it's
right?
gonna be in that area, right? I mean,
Somewhere, yeah.
and again, it's not gonna be hard and fast, because I just woke up, I don't feel good, or I got the brown bottle flu over the weekend, or whatever it was. We just gotta, we gotta be able to gauge. Maybe it's a 2-day stretch. We hit a day, but then the next day there's 10 people back. Okay, panic's off. But if the next day it's the same, and we see a trend of 2 or 3 days in a row, we just got to deal with that way.
I think we also need our community to step. We need 20 people willing to come in and help us.
It's
We need
fun.
20 parents that are willing to come in and help us at some level, so that we cut that number in half. And we had 3 school board members last week. We volunteer here and we volunteer there too. So it's like, we're forcing Kristen's hand to keep open. We're forcing our teachers, they're working their tails off.
You've done a good job keeping it open.
They've
I
done
will
an
give you
amazing
that.
job. It's time for the community to step up as well. I really think we've pushed the nth degree. You guys are maxed out. Our teachers are stressed. It seems to me that over this Christmas break, we should be able to get 20
cavalry.
people to would step up and help, whether it's
Does
maybe they can
Middleton
do it on
do
Mondays
that?
or pick out some days that would help us. If that number's 40, that number's 30, but that gives us some flex as opposed to hitting the wall.
But I still think this recommendation is important from Kristen because it's an overall,
Yeah.
like when they shut down the school for influenza or whatever. like,
Yeah,
Because this is an overall staff and student positive case. It has nothing to do with absences. You could have only 20 teachers gone and 150 or 200 positive COVID tests at one time.
Mhm.
And that is a big deal.
oh, yeah,
And so that's where I think this is kind of just a good number to have in the back of our mind that says there are too many kids that have it. We just need to
I
shut it down
agree.
for 2 weeks to let
Clean.
everything
and
clean.
yes,
And
how quickly
start
would you
over.
do that? Like immediately, like
When we
March?
close it down.
Mm-hmm. Just so my brain can wrap around it, sorry.
If it's a staffing issue, it would be immediate. If we already have kids here, we have to figure out how to get those kids home.
Okay,
Are you talking about this?
yeah,
this
just shut,
percentage
I just
part?
don't wanna understand how quickly we would shut down.
If it's a positivity rate, I would say, and we would see that day and say the following day, this is effective.
Okay, that's what I want. How quickly would we act on
So
this?
what would be our number? What's our total staff student number? District-wide, like what would we base this 5% off of? What number would we use?
We're right around probably 4,200, 4,300.
So if we said-
Student numbers, I think they're about 39. and then-
3850 is student numbers.
So about 210, 215,
So
somewhere around there.
215 positive cases. I guess what's everyone else's feedback on a rolling 2-week, or what do you think that 14 days? It doesn't specify in anything I read, it just says a 14-day period.
Well, I guess my question is, I agree with and understand the 5% on the COVID positivity rate. Absolutely, but, okay, so specific programs, I guess is where I'm a little bit. On the shortages that have us on the brink of sending students home from specific programs, that obviously is gonna be a case-by-case basis,
And
depending on who's out.
and most likely it's gonna hit special education rooms.
Right, okay, so, you could have to where you would not shut down the entire district for 14 days if it's specific programs, correct? If I'm reading that correctly? So whether it's special or whether it's Mill Creek or something to that effect, the high school could still be going, middle school could still be going, and it could shut down those departments or that school, let's say worst case scenario, an entire school, Heights or Herbal Sage or what have you. But we're still under this 5% on the positivity rate. So that would, in essence, be a case-by-case basis. We're not just shutting the world down.
Right.
Okay. And that makes sense to me as well. Because we know we're gonna have to be case-by-case basis. I understand and agree with the 5% that if we have 200 plus students and staff out testing positive, that's an issue.
Yeah.
So I guess my question for that would be, are the administrators gonna get, if we adopt this 5%, first question, what would be the 14-day period? Would it be rolling or not? And then my second question would be, each administrator report to you every day, or how would that get tracked so you
We
can
would just
keep
start
running?
a shared spreadsheet that everybody was contributing to so we could track it.
And then would that information be released to staff? Would it be public information? Would it just be information the district had?
It can be, we can redact it and release it if people wanna see it.
Just
Or
how
we
many?
can- We can keep it posted, redact it and post it.
So it wouldn't say staff or student, it would just show the number of positive cases per, like, district-wide.
Or it could specify, I would be, probably for my own purposes, I would want it, classified by staff and by student.
Yeah.
I guess I just
That's a
worry
good
that if
idea.
it's coming from administrators and it's public information, if it's broken down in staff and students, some of our schools are very small. Would they be able to tell who
I
they
don't
were?
think so.
The other school districts have been reporting by school level,
Staff and student per school.
the numbers.
So I think as long as we just make sure that we're respecting everyone's privacy and don't cross that line, then that would be, I think people just want to know, like, I think staff members are nervous because they want to know, but I also think it would just give the community and all of us a good baseline to see, you know, if we hit that 215 positive number,
Yeah,
then
then
that means we're shutting down for 2 weeks.
Yep. Just the transparency of it, I think that's.
Okay, so then I guess the next part just goes back to just everyone's thoughts on this, the CDC guidelines and for the quarantines.
I think if you test, if you're a positive case, you're out for 14 days regardless. I'd like to see some adjustment in if you weren't positive and that you're able to test out. I don't know about I was sitting next to him and so I should be able to go back in 10 days. It really would be, there's enough of a concern there that they're not cramming Q-tips into your brain anymore. They've got better tests. You can spit, you can just swab the inside of your nose instead of going all the way up. They're available at pharmacies. Most health plans are covering them now. That it's worthwhile to at least have that option. You can, you've been exposed. We know you're not positive, but you either, if you want to get back to school in 7 days, go get a test. If not, just hang out at home for 14 days.
Well, I think if we're gonna do the 7, we might as well do the 10, just because that's what the CDC recommendation is.
I agree.
I mean, I think it's like
Mhm.
1% if
Yeah.
you look at the amount of, and a standard virus that you develop symptoms in 5 to 7 days is pretty standard.
I think 14 days is too long.
Yeah,
So a couple things on that test. I don't know if you guys read through that letter from Southwest. It does have to be a very specific test. That's not a go anywhere, take whatever test I want and come back. So everybody needs to understand that. And then the other thing that I would say on the quarantine, the guidance from the CDC and Southwest is still 14 days. They said this is an acceptable alternative, but they have still very much said that their guidance is 14 days.
Which I think then it gives people choice, right? Like if they still choose, they would like to feel that it's necessary for them to be out for 14, that's fine. But there's other people who I feel like shouldn't be forced in that. They should have options. And I think says it's for those people. It says right here, the revised options, shorten isolation for some, are acceptable alternatives to reduce the burden of isolation on individuals, families, and businesses. And I think the longer this COVID goes on, the more burden it is of having continuous quarantines, whether it's the parent or a sibling or multiple siblings, or because it goes through their friend group slowly or whatever the reason. I just think they need to have options.
And then I guess part 2 of that, if you go with a reduced quarantine, I need to understand what we're supposed to be doing with those students when they return to school as far as distancing.
What do you mean?
So if we adopt the shortened quarantine timeline and allow them to come back before 14 days, they're supposed to be distanced until they hit the 14-day mark.
So I think that looks different for each classroom. If it's elementary, a lot of them have rooms, you can pull a desk out 6 feet away and have them sit. They have the plexiglass and masks and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, we just get back to that guidelines and the percentages.
We're certainly at a place where there's no playing around with masks at that point. I mean, you are masked up coming back, and I don't know. I haven't done enough research into the rest of it to come up with a good decision.
Or does it say that they have to stay for 14 days?
It's on page 1 of the Southwest
But that's not, is that the
Right here on
Southwest,
this
or is that-
bottom.
Is that CDC or
Right
is that
here.
Southwest?
The one I'm looking at.
It says regardless of what scenario is followed, symptom monitoring, masking, hand hygiene, and physical distancing must continue through day 14.
But did the CDC guidelines say that, or did Southwest add that?
I think I attached the, no, I didn't, let me pull it up.
I mean, even so, they want us closed right now in red, so.
I just think it's important to point out the liability here. I mean, we're not 100% compliance on face coverings. We're not social distancing. We have put everybody back in full capacity. Now we're gonna shorten quarantines. We're gonna bring students back before we're not sure that they don't have it. And we already have high rates of absenteeism.
But our high rates are because of quarantine.
No,
Yeah.
no, our staff, high rates of absenteeism are not because of quarantine. We have very few staff out on quarantine that are not symptomatic.
So everybody that is out is a positive case, every single teacher?
No.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So after day 10, without testing, it says residual post-quarantine transmission risk is estimated to be 1% with an upper limit of 10%. And then if you get the test on day 7, if you use that strategy, the post-quarantine transmission risk is estimated to be about 5% with an upper limit of about 12%. This just says, in both cases, additional criteria, continued symptom monitoring and masking through day 14 must be met and are outlined in full text. This is the cdc.gov website that I'm reading off of.
So they're just saying, the CDC is saying symptom monitoring, obviously, masking, hygiene through day 14. And
Daily
is it
symptom
Southwest
monitoring.
District Health that's added the must be distanced for the 14?
My understanding is that Southwest doesn't put anything out that's not in line with CDC. So I would say that's congruent. I haven't looked to see if that's the CDC. So
Well, she
I
just
can't
read
say
it.
that.
Off the
Is
CDC.
They
anywhere?
didn't say that physical distancing is not required.
It didn't say that it was.
I'm still reading, I'm looking.
That could be
I
another
haven't seen it on
Yeah,
yet, but
and not saying that it could or couldn't.
It does. On the CDC guidelines, it says wear a mask, stay at least 6 feet from others, wash their hands, avoid crowds, and take other steps to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So it says stay at least 6 feet from others.
From the 10 through after the 10-day,
Yeah, it
between
says
10.
after stopping quarantine, you should, and it has 3 bullet points. And it says watch for symptoms until 14 days after exposure. If you have symptoms, immediately self-isolate and contact your local public health authority or healthcare provider. And then the last bullet says wear a mask, stay at least 6 feet from others, wash their hands, avoid crowds, and take other steps to prevent the spread of COVID-19. It's at the bottom of that page on their when to quarantine on the CDC.
and I'm looking at their specific options to reduce quarantine for contacts of person with COVID infected using symptom monitoring and diagnostic testing. So the specific one for the clear as mud.
Give it 2 weeks, it'll change. I'd like to see people be able to get back to class sooner. To Kristen's, feelings on this, it doesn't hurt to err on the side of caution, and we're already walking the line. People are emotional, upset, and kind of concerned about it. I don't know if there's a middle ground.
I think Emmett had a 5-day quarantine. That's what they
Was
picked
it
to do.
5 or was it 7?
I thought it was 5 at one point, unless they changed it again.
That's fine.
Yeah, but they've also been like up and down kind of. I prefer not to roller coaster this thing. It'd be great if
Kind of happy
the
medium.
second half of the year our kids go back and it's not a pinball machine for them. That there's some semblance of normalcy. I don't know. Maybe having letting them know that, hey, it's not gonna change yet, will bring some awareness in the community and people start paying attention. On the flip side, what kind of effect does that have on our kids emotionally and otherwise? Being stuck at home, and there's a lot of stuff going on, you know, just mental health wise that the kids are really struggling with. I don't know enough about it to be able to say, hey, you know, it's that time period that's really affecting them, or it's just the overall stress of the situation that's affecting the mental health of our kids. I don't know where our kids, specifically in our community, are mental health wise. But I know where some of my fellow parents are mental health wise, having kids stuck at home with them. When they feel like, you know, there's no exposure here.
I was gonna say, would anyone consider adopting this and revisiting it in January or February? January's not, we only have what, like 1 week of school before January?
Maybe February.
Or February, and if it's an absolute disaster and there's just absolutely no way we can do it, like I can see if you have 17 kids that are quarantined, trying to bring them back early, but not all are going to choose to get the test at day 7. Some of them might choose to stay out the 14 days. If they come back at 10, I mean, with our 4-day week, if it's one kid or 2 kids, even in our elementary rooms, you can social distance those. Those high school kids, they can sit on the back counter in the science room. Like,
The basketball team's doing it.
I just think like when they're quarantining, they're not quarantining. They're going to the mall, they're hanging out, they're not doing their homework. It's just not doing what it's meant to be doing. And I just want to give it a shot. I just think that they should have options besides a dead hard 14 days. And I think the staff should too. If they're out of FMLA time and they're out of sick leave and they've been quarantined a bunch of times, and some of the staff, you know, they are essential workers, but I just think that families and staff need options. And this is what the CDC, it's not something we made up. It's something the CDC brought forth. And if we can do it, great. If there's no way we absolutely can't physical distance it, then I guess leave it up to each administrator to handle that when that comes. I mean, even if they came back to school and put them in a different classroom, live stream their stuff in their classroom. I don't know. I'm looking for options. Kristen, I see you shaking your head like.
Well, I don't know who's gonna supervise that extra classroom. I don't know who's gonna watch the kids when they're in the bathroom or at recess or at lunch and make sure that that 6-foot distance is there. You know, you're talking about 1 to 2 kids. We have around 100 kids on quarantine at the high school right now. So does the quarantine end? You know,
but the quarantine to me, I'm like, both people have masks. The chances of them even having it are so slim that it just doesn't even make sense to me to keep them all out for ever and ever, because they might have been exposed maybe.
Do we keep track at all of, out of all of the kids that have been quarantined for whatever reason, okay? Because of our current guidelines, that they've had to stay out 14 days. How many of those have tested positive? That if you quarantine one kid positive is susceptible or whatever, they may not even be positive. Possible exposures. So you quarantine the girls' basketball team. How many of those kids that were quarantined for that 14 days turned out to be positive? Do we keep track of any of that stuff?
So we do have record of that. That's why I've asked you guys to let me know what information I can get to you to help you make these decisions, because I can't pull it right now.
Okay, no, I'm just asking because it would be helpful to find out.
But part B of that is some of them are not testing. So what about all the ones that are sick, out of quarantine and sick and not testing? Do we care about that?
Well, yeah, but we're still gonna bring them back to school if they're sick or not.
No,
if they don't test, okay, and let's say they don't have symptoms anymore, they still could be positive and we're bringing them back to school.
If they have symptoms, they have to stay out for a period of time.
If they don't, it's proven fact. You can show symptoms, it all goes away, turn around and pop positive 2 weeks down the road and not have any symptoms.
I would like to see us focus on data.
No, I agree. That's what I'm asking for is because if we've got, and I'll use the example of the girls' basketball team, okay? So we took out 12 kids or 14 kids, okay? How many of those ended up testing positive?
We're not
Or-
gonna know that right now, but I can tell you once that quarantine period is up.
Yeah, I would like to know that in general because that tells us, okay, it gives us a good idea. How many kids have we put out in quarantine since this whole thing started, since school?
A lot of them have already had it. And
Yeah.
they never tested.
Right.
Then you have just proven the point. They're not testing.
Well, I know, but we
So we're
don't,
putting
just like the
everybody
flu
else
and
at
the
risk.
cold, but everyone's wearing masks. We're covering that. We're fogging our schools. We have hand sanitizer. We're taking precautions that we would just during, that's more than we would do for the flu or cold or anything else. So we're covering those bases.
Well, to Kristen's point, we don't have the data, and I think it's important we use data to make decisions from. And so, I mean, we got, what, 3 days left this week, and then we're on vacation.
Day and a
so-
half.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, but we also have kids out who are trying to get back to take finals. Who
Yeah.
the decision we make today can
And-
affect those
And they're
kids.
seniors, and it would be good.
And
Well,
kids
but
that
those kids would have to go and get tested with this test that is none too fun.
Not if it's been 10
There's
days.
kids on the boys basketball team that are missing games. There's girls basketball teams that are missing games. There's kids that are trying to get to see grandma and grandpa. There's kids I mean, this decision today does make effect. I think if this came down from the CDC guideline and they're the ones who recommend it, they're supposed to be the experts in this, that I don't think we're wrong in trying to follow it the best we can. And I really don't think that a lawsuit for trying to follow something the best we can, the governor said that he wants the schools open. The governor said that, like,
Fauci said that.
we're doing the best we can to keep our
So
kids
did
there.
Redfield.
It just doesn't make sense to me to say 14 days flat with no medically, logically, I mean, where's the logic? It doesn't make sense.
Well, the bottom line is we've been doing what we've been doing since September to now. And quite frankly, the wheels haven't come off. And we've been hearing that what we were gonna do was gonna be the most disastrous thing ever. Do we struggle? Yeah, but we're not. Well, just look at the number of who's getting sick and who's being hospitalized and who's the long-term effects. It's just, I'm tired of the arguments because it's, nobody's changing lanes or everybody's in
Yeah.
one lane and that's. I'd like to revisit the 5% if we think that's, to me, that's the most important. To me, the quarantine thing, we're probably not gonna change much. It's gonna leave it as, to me, the 5% gives staff a safety net. It gives the community an idea that this is where we shut this down, so they know. I think that's more important than the quarantine piece. I think we could take a motion with both of them, but I think that this 5% thing is critical, and I think it needs to be addressed so the teachers have an idea where we're at, the MEA has an idea, parents have an idea. There is a number that we shut this thing down with. If, do we understand that 5%? Are we?
I just need clarification on the 14 days, if it's gonna be 14-day rolling or 14-day Monday to Monday. When this, like, the day 1, December 1st till December 14th, or just for clarification, it's not a deal breaker. I just wanna know how we determine that 14 days to look.
I think if we pull the trigger and it's on a Tuesday, then it's 2 Tuesdays down the road. Just 14 days, and there's no.
No, not for the school closure. How are they counting? So
Or are
you
they
have to have-
keeping the numbers?
So to hit our 215
Accumulate.
positive cases, is it from X date to X date, or is it the rolling number where this date falls off and then these get added, but these fall off, and then these get added and these fall off and these get added?
And are we talking positive cases?
Positive confirmed cases. This isn't quarantine. This is just positive confirmed cases.
Well, and
That's
I
a good
guess,
idea.
thinking about it, you've got a 2-week portion here, but half the kids could be on the tail end of that. So ultimately, it's really only a week that we have that number, and then all of a sudden the cases start going down. I don't know, that's,
I follow what you're saying now, took me a little bit,
Oh, to understand whether it was a
Yeah.
2-week chunk or rolling.
because you can
So Kristen, what are you
manipulate that,
proposing on that?
I think.
I don't understand any way that it wouldn't be rolling. So in my mind, like if we were starting tomorrow, we're tracking the cases as we learn of them every day for those 14 days. On the 15th day, that 15th day comes on and the first day falls off.
So you're saying we shut down for 14 days, no matter what, and on the 15th day, we take another snapshot, really?
No.
it's not
We're
rolling.
just talking about how to get to the 5%.
How to determine you
determine
have
when
5%.
you have
That's how we
5%.
would count, how we get to 5%.
And I was asking, do
And
we
at the
start?
point that we hit that, we would say we're closing and be closed for a minimum of 2 weeks.
By looking at a 2-week average,
Mm-hmm.
so.
Not an average.
Not an
total.
average, just
Just a
number of
full-on
cases.
number, so if it just starts going
So
up,
between tomorrow and 14 days from tomorrow, what's that total number of positive cases? Are we at, what do we say, 215?
215. But historically, in the district, we've had 100 positive cases since this started, was your guesstimate?
That's my guess. I don't.
So district-wide, from the beginning of March until now, we've had 100. So never 215 within that same time period. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So my question was, if we were gonna we start counting on December 1st and we stop counting on December 14th,
And then
if we get up to 215 and then we start again at 0 on the 15th and go for 2 more weeks, if we get up to 215, then we call it.
Well, you're saying we do the
Which
rolling
is not
average.
what I was just
Yeah,
saying.
you're saying
Right.
rolling average through that 2 weeks.
yeah, it's
Because
just,
that tells you if you're going up or
yeah,
down.
the ramp is going up, hit 215, boom.
And then it would just be a full 2 weeks after that, because everyone would basically
Yeah,
be
I
in
think
quarantine for a full 2
That
weeks.
makes sense to,
yeah.
you know, the trend line then. Yeah. Well, I'm okay with that. That's, seems like we're,
Well, I'll make a motion then that we accept the, if we reach a COVID-19 positivity rate of 5% between staff and students within a 14-day period, a rolling 14-day period, that we close schools and transition to full remote learning for a minimum of 2 weeks.
that's your entire motion.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
More discussion? None seen, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
And then if you guys want to talk about the mask stuff, that's,
Well, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we adopt the new revised version of the CDC Guidelines and Southwest District Health, which states the 7-day quarantine with testing, the 10-day quarantining with no testing, and obviously 14-day quarantine at that point with social distancing between day 10, day 14 that the CDC has now released.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
So in discussion, our point is, how do we distance and how do we monitor that day 10,
2, 4.
day 7 to 14 or day 10 to 14 and that? So I'm wondering if we have that in there.
The only way we're gonna be able to pull it off is, well, I don't know. I mean, facility wise and, logistically, we've gotta, I think it's a hard thing to move forward with without a lot of community involvement to help support it, because we can't have some kid over here, staring at the stars or,
But I think it's a case-to-case basis. Most classrooms, they can. Like, let me rephrase that.
Some kids
Most
get to be isolated.
Elementary classrooms, if not half the class is quarantined, which typically that's not what we're seeing, is that the kids aren't testing positive at the elementary level, that they would be able to scoot a desk 6 feet away and have them still participate. They could put their plexiglass up or whatever they need to do and keep them in school.
But it's not typically one kid, right? I mean.
In elementary, that
if-
actually test positive, there's more getting quarantined.
Right.
But how many have we actually had test positive in our elementary schools? Not nearly what we have in the high school or middle school.
I'm not sure why that plays into the conversation.
Because for this quarantines, when they're coming back, the ones that are testing positives are the ones that cause the quarantines, right? So if you don't have as many kids getting tested positive, then you're not gonna have as many quarantined kids.
Well, so if a kid tests positive and the
They're
other
out
kids
for
around
14
them
days.
are also on quarantine, they're out, the positive kid's out for 14 days. No ifs, ands, or
Right.
buts, right? The other kids are out for 7 if with a test or 10 days now. But when they come back for 4 more days, CDC says they've gotta be 6 feet away. So that one kid is impacted for the 2 weeks. They're gone, that's fine. What about those other 4 kids around them? Is
Why
there
can't you
6
just take
feet?
those 4 kids and quarantine them together 6 feet from everyone else? Because they were all exposed
Yeah,
together.
same exposure.
So first of all, the clarification, if somebody tests positive, they're out till 10 days off symptoms.
Yeah, so from their 10 days from the onset day of their
Onset.
symptoms.
So if they test positive for COVID and from whenever they started symptoms, they're 10 days out. So, but right now, according to Southwest District Health Guidelines, it's read, we're supposed to be socially distancing at the high school and we're not. We're masking up. So if we're bending that rule, then this quarantine rule is basically the same thing, where we're saying, hey, the masks are working, revisit masks, make sure they're there. We quarantine 7 with a 5-day test, or 10 days. Getting in that social distancing piece is, you're just going down a rabbit hole that 1%, I mean, it's.
Yeah, then I think you're looking at having to find a way to make a stronger either mandate or at least enforcement of masks, because there's somewhere, there's people not wearing them on occasion. We don't know. I mean, maybe it happened once, somebody's having flashbacks, but there's concern there that people aren't wearing them as they should. And that's gonna be super important if we make that adjustment, is that, okay, if you can't social distance, then you have to wear that mask to take that down to that below 10% chance of.
Well, the mask thing needs to be revisited or confirmed anyways, because 45% of the kids are asymptomatic. So,
Right.
I mean, we wouldn't even know they had symptoms. They're around high school. So if you're
How many
there,
are
you have
not
to wear your
wearing
mask.
masks?
What's that?
How many are not wearing masks? What kind of problem is that? Just curious.
I think you would see a variation between buildings. I think our building that, we probably have the most masking challenges with, I would say we probably have 25% in that building without.
Really?
That might be.
Do they feel like they're socially distanced?
Are they socially distanced?
Do they feel like they're socially distanced? Are they trying to use that as, just curious?
Do they feel that way? Maybe, I don't.
I'm just
They feel
curious.
that way.
Or they just don't want to put it on?
Yeah, we know the reality is they can't all be socially distanced.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, if the kid is walking down the hall by himself and there's no one around, he's socially distanced. If he doesn't have his mask on, take it easy, but when he walks into the room, then ask him nicely to put it on. But I'm just hoping that it's not becoming like we feel like we have to be police, which.
Well, I'm just saying that if we're counting on the masks to be
Yes,
the
then,
equalizer, and some people aren't willing to do this, but we're willing to change these standards,
They need to put the mask on.
They really, I mean, we
That's
need
the
the community
compromise,
support.
yeah.
And just, I
Do
mean, tell your
it.
kids, sorry, wear a mask. I mean, there's just,
It's the
it's tough, it
compromise.
sucks. I know, I just flew to Hawaii and back with a mask on. It's not fun. But, if we're gonna power through this and keep school open and keep everybody functioning, keeping kids interacting together, which is really important, and the level of education up, gotta wear a mask. If we're gonna make this adjustment to, hey, you can go back after 10 days or 7 days or whatever, you gotta wear a mask. There's just not, we're really trying to find a reasonable middle ground. And if people aren't gonna be reasonable, then that's gonna screw everything up and that derails the train.
I think as board members, we should all commit to just popping into a couple schools here before break and just see with our own eyes and see,
Unexpected.
pick a school and
I know which one I'd like to go to.
But they still don't
unexpectedly.
need to have them at recess or lunchtime.
outside.
So
No,
anytime
that
they're outside.
Outside is nice to
Well, I
have a mask
worry,
break.
I worry about them getting on the buses and stuff, like even at recess at a school, like I don't know who the kids are. I can't tell which kid's going with which parent or which kid's getting on the bus when they all have masks on or which
Oh,
parents are picking them
seriously?
up. Like, I mean, it's,
But they know, yeah.
well, I know, but I'm just saying like when they're outside, I think they're good. And as long as when they're inside, because usually there's recesses and drop off pickup is short. They're in and out. They're not there longer than 15 minutes. They're
Well, and
outside.
recesses are structured differently right now, aren't they, Kristen? Where their grade level, at least at Purple Sage.
That's a
It's
building decision.
a building
They can say
decision.
district-wide, but to your reference to the 15 minutes, in that scenario, the 15 minutes.
Is
if you're
easily
within
taken
6
care of.
feet, You should have on a mask. It's not if you're within 6 feet for 15 minutes. We've said if you're within 6 feet, you should have on a face covering.
Mm-hmm.
So the kids don't all wear masks at drop off and pick up at the middle school or at any of the schools. And I don't think they should. I think it's a safety issue. I think the teachers need to be able to see the kids. They need to be able to see the adult that's picking them up. We've had issues with custody before of people picking up wrong people. All of a sudden COVID happens and we're not worried. People are leaving their doors propped open. It's like in the classrooms, you walk down the halls, like what happened to all these safety measures that we went to pre-COVID? And now all of a sudden they're more worried about the air circulation in their room than anything else. Like, I feel like we've lost logic and safety is still there.
Yeah. I was gonna say,
Well, I think
We said
should-
at recess and lunch, they don't have to wear them. And I think drop off and pick up's the same thing. I don't think they should have
if
to wear
they're
them.
outside, no?
We said you gotta wear it on the bus. Right, we agree with them.
Which are in an enclosed area
Yeah,
on the
so
bus.
so- Yeah, it just seems common sense. We start splitting hairs and trying to manage this to a nth degree where it's just,
Well, but I did
Wear your
junior
mask.
golf all summer and we were outside and we were okay.
yeah, when you're outside, it's, I don't,
We were okay. It's not perfect, but
so we have a motion on the floor in a second. We've been discussing that would accept the complete Southwest District Guidelines of 710 and include the social distancing afterwards. You could amend that motion, we could take a vote.
Amend it to take the social distancing out or amend it to.
I mean, after discussion and everything else, I think you're absolutely right. If you're, the difference between 10 days and 14 days is less than 1%. We're splitting hairs, and the ability to be able to monitor, Kristen makes a great point, how you're gonna monitor them in the bathrooms, in these different places and stuff like that. I think we should, to what Alicia said, go by their guidelines, but we need to give it a shot. We don't know. It may work perfect. It may work great. We may not see an increase in cases. We may. We don't know. We've been going through this whole thing on not assuming anything, in that we just have to take it on a case-by-case basis and make the decisions accordingly, the best that we know how, as far as that goes. I think we should go to adopt their guidelines with the 7 days and 10 days and alleviate social distancing between day 10 and day 14.
Then you would make a friendly amendment and pull off the take away the distancing.
That is correct.
Since it's your motion, you can do that.
Yes.
So you do that.
Okay. So I want to amend my motion that we adopt CDC guidelines and Southwest District's Health with one exception, that we alleviate the day 10 to 14 social distancing aspect of it.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
All those in favor of the motion on the floor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
I have to abstain because I have a conflict of interest and because I'm biased.
All those opposed?
Nay.
So it carries 3-1-1. Any other? Category discussions, COVID discussions? Not seeing any, we will move to executive session. We should do your thing.
I make a motion to move into executive session per Idaho Code 74-206, subsection A, to consider hiring a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent wherein the respective qualities of individuals are to be evaluated in order to fill a particular vacancy or need. This paragraph does not apply to filling a vacancy in elective office or deliberations about staffing needs in general. Subsection B, to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent, or public school student.
Second.
Take a roll call vote to go into executive session.
Trustee Moore,
Yes.
trustee Dempsey,
Yes.
trustee Wagner,
Yes.
trustee McConkey,
Yes.
trustee Adams.
Yes. Now executive session. Don't move forward. All right, we're back from executive session.
I'll make a motion to come out of executive session.
Second?
Roll call come out or we not? So,
We don't need to, but I'm looking.
all those in favor say aye.
I,
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. I would entertain any motions coming out of executive session.
I make a motion that we approve administrative leave for employee number 1, 12-15-20.
A second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right,
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. I would entertain a motion to end the meeting.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 all right.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0.